Ah, plot armour, the good old notion that a character in a story must survive or demonstrate feats in such a manner that breaks the rules established within the verse or makes no logical sense in canon. This has been a heavily misunderstood concept for years now, and whilst yes, the recent Suicide Squad game is a fantastic example of the main characters having disgusting levels of plot armour, this is usually handled in dishonest ways to criticise a game's story or characters. And the example we're going to go over today is Miles Morales from the Insomniac games. Now don't get me wrong, I was never a die-hard Miles fan, as Peter Parker, in my opinion, will always be the definitive Spider-Man. However, since we established in a previous video that Peter was not nerfed or made weaker to boost Miles, let's now go over the opposite side of the coin and establish whether or not Miles had plot armor to surpass Peter. In the PS4 Spider-Man game, Miles has a couple of moments where he interacts with the main characters during the main plot. However, there's really nothing here that would indicate plot armor. Sure, he does manage to hack presumably military-grade equipment and evades the Rhino in one section. However, given that MJ also evades Sable Goons and Miles is established to be exceptionally gifted when it comes to technology, this isn't too far-fetched in my opinion. Fast forward to Miles being bitten by the spider and going on patrols with Peter, and this is where the main topic begins, with the Rhino convoy mission at the beginning of Miles' game. People seem to be under the impression that Miles vastly surpassed Peter out of nowhere, and that Peter was randomly nerfed just to make Miles stronger, and it's simply not true. It's established multiple times in the PS4 game that Peter cannot beat Rhino in a physical fight, and needs to resort to abusing his superior speed and intelligence to bring down the giant, so Peter trying to bring down the Rhino in this game ends about as well as you'd expect, with Peter taking a beating before being knocked unconscious. The second thing is Miles' new Venom abilities give him a tremendous advantage and mitigate the strength difference, with these Venom powers being so potent that Rhino's shock-resistant suit does little to protect him for long against these abilities. The final reason why Miles wins as easily as he does is because of his agility. Rhino is essentially a super strong and durable juggernaut, however that's all he has going for him. Miles at this moment in time can counter that raw power advantage in addition to abusing his speed and agility, and it's not like Miles is dumb by any means, just like Peter does when he abuses his intelligence against Rhino. Yet even with all of this factoring into the equation, Rhino still knocks Miles around through multiple walls and gets a few good hits in before going down. Miles has developed a new ability out of nowhere, sure, however he's going against essentially an 8-ton moron who is exceptionally strong, yes, but that's all he has going for him. Compare that to Rey vs Kylo Ren for example, where Rey beats Kylo in a lightsaber duel despite never holding a lightsaber before, and her opponent being Kylo, who is exceptionally strong and skilled in his own regard. A more fair comparison would be comparing how both inexperienced Spider-Men did against Rhino, with an early Peter Parker needing 2 weeks of rest to recover from his Rhino fight, yet Miles beat him with far greater ease due to this new power and the training he got from a more experienced Peter Parker. With the OG Spider-Man departing from New York for a while, it leaves New York in the safe hands of Miles, and unsurprisingly things go rapidly south with Roxxon coming onto the scene, with the next major set piece being the bridge destruction. Miles does indeed save the people on the bridge and delays the collapse, however he indirectly caused the damage himself, and with Miles being branded a criminal from not just Roxxon, but also the criminal group known as the Underground, barely escaping the bridge due to his camouflage ability. Despite supposedly having plot armor, both Miles and the Tinkerer are captured by Rhino in his new Roxxon armor, which was built to nullify Miles' abilities and had managed to knock Miles out, and all this had happened before Miles was transported to the lab for analysis, with Miles then being subjected to fucking torture of all things, before he goes into his rematch with this stronger Rhino. Now keep in mind that Miles' abilities are now ineffective and borderline useless against Alexei, and as a result he uses his brains to beat him, by supercharging engine pieces, rendering them unstable, and combining those explosive machines with his own attacks to destroy parts of the armour to then expose Rhino to his Venom attacks. Once again, this isn't plot armor, as Miles beats this stronger Rhino in a similar manner that Peter had taken down base Rhino in the past, and the game even established that Miles' Venom strikes are effective against Rhino once that new armor was taken away from him. Following this fight, our beloved plot armor filled character is beaten to the point of being rendered unconscious with cracked ribs no less by the Tinkerer, aka Finn. And this character is not only the main quote-unquote antagonist of the game, but also someone who is consistently shown to be superior to Miles until the final battle where he's finally able to defeat her. However, this was largely done not by being stronger by any means, but instead due to Miles following the advice from his father, the idea that he is no hero, but just a guy who doesn't give up. And well, that's essentially what he does. The best feat that Miles has in his solo game is absorbing a level of energy from the Roxxon reactor, which was described as being capable of powering New York for the next 500 years, and able to destroy all of Harlem. However, this is something that clearly causes great pain to Miles, and isn't something he does easily. Earlier in the story, he successfully destroys the lab after absorbing the energy synthesizer. However, this effort nearly renders Miles unconscious, with the reactor feat in the final battle nearly killing him, and well, it does kill Finn. Despite fucking up multiple times in the story and showing that Miles is far from perfect and not a Mary Sue or any of these moronic terms, he does prove that he has now come into his own as a superhero, which Peter respects when he returns at the end of the game, with Peter even saying during a piece of dialogue that he's not going to be watching over Miles like an overly protective parent, and that he trusts him. Ah yes, Spider-Man 2, the game that had people believing that Miles vastly surpassed Peter and had it easy in the story. Well, let's see how that theory holds up. Against Sandman, Miles does clearly show he's more suitable for dealing with a foe such as Marco than Peter is. However, I've got to question, when you are dealing with an opponent literally made of sand, and one character has access to electricity based attacks and the other doesn't, who do you think is going to fare better in that scenario? Especially when mid-fight, Peter and Miles douse Marco in water, which makes the Venom powers all the more effective, especially if we assume it functions as real-world lightning, as extreme heat is another weakness of Sandman and something that changes its property. Despite this, however, Miles doesn't solo Marco by any means and could have died during that fight, and it was only with Peter's battle plan that results in both Spider-Men pulling out a narrow victory, with them combining Peter's spider arms with Miles' Venom powers. Miles does have it easier than Peter for the most part in Spider-Man 2 admittedly, however not for the reasons you think. I mean, think about it, aside from Mr. Negative, who does Miles actually fight that poses a threat? Compare that to Peter, who fights and ultimately beats the Lizard and Kraven in 1v1s when he has the black suit, with Miles being borderline useless against Lizard, and with Kraven not even considering him worthy of killing him when symbiote Peter is swinging around. The other major conflicts usually involve both Spider-Men teaming up, or being very circumstantial. Take Peter versus Miles for example. I've already broken this fight down in greater detail in other videos, and even proved how Peter would have beaten Miles if this fight and situation had been different. However, as a brief summary, neither character was at 100%, nor going all out, with Peter becoming progressively more conflicted as Miles starts getting through to him, with Miles abusing his Venom abilities and the Bell, which gave him a massive advantage. The Bell especially, as it renders Peter completely useless and vulnerable, with prolonged exposure potentially being fatal to symbiotes. Essentially, Miles didn't beat Peter, but instead outlasted him long enough to snap him out of the influenced state that the symbiote imposed on him, whilst using the Bell and his various Venom abilities to keep Peter at bay and mitigate the raw power of the symbiote suit. Something that people would know if they actually played the game. Before we tackle the final boss, I want to briefly talk about the moment in the campaign where Peter is talking to Miles, saying that New York would be perfectly okay with just one Spider-Man. This is quite the sweet moment between the student and the mentor, and shows how far Mr. Morales has come since the PS4 game, whilst also showing how Peter has grown as a character. However, this moment is sadly tarnished by people viewing it as being part of a woke agenda. In my opinion, the only way you can come to this conclusion is if you didn't play these games and even missed key plot points from the PS4 game, a year prior in the events of Spider-Man Miles Morales, an inexperienced Miles successfully proved that he is indeed capable of defending New York even with Peter in another country, with Peter acknowledging and praising his success. So it should be no surprise to anyone and their nan that a more experienced, powerful, slightly more mature Miles would also be capable of defending the city without Peter on the scene. This is common sense. Additionally, Peter in this game is clearly suffering the emotional turmoil from the fallout of the PS4 game. He's lost all his biological family members, with Aunt May's death affecting him especially, when factoring in all the potential damage he might have inflicted to MJ, Harry, Miles, Dr. Connors, and anyone else he interacted with when bonding to the symbiote. It's pretty clear that anyone would be suffering emotionally from these events, and a lesser man would have broken ages ago. But even someone like Peter Parker has his breaking point, which is hinted at in this game. The guy is also getting older and wanting to be more stable and secure in his life and his relationship with Mary Jane. He's trying to take on more hours with his teaching career, even if he isn't all too successful. He has a house with a mortgage he's trying to pay off. In other words, this isn't some woke mission to replace the white guy with the black guy, but instead Peter is entering a new chapter in his life and is comforted and maybe even relieved that Miles would be more than capable of handling the whole web-slinging thing in his absence. The Venom fight is sadly yet another in the long line of targets for people to point out the supposed plot armour of Miles. I can't say I'm too surprised, but let's see about that. Venom is holding back throughout the story as his goals are to heal the world by turning humans into symbiotes a la Web of Shadows. However, he clearly doesn't want Miles nor Peter to be killed, and the only instance Venom actually showed willingness to kill was against Kraven, since he believed that Kravinoff was the reason why the bond was broken between him and Peter earlier in the game. He's clearly a tier above both Spider-Man in stats as he killed Kraven, the same guy who overpowered symbiote Peter, and he even showed multiple times he's more than capable of overwhelming Miles and Peter, even when the latter had the anti-venom. Yet he still doesn't want them dead, as there are multiple points in the story where he could have killed them both, yet chose not to. Especially Peter, as he could have bitten his head off immediately after bonding with Harry, if he truly wanted him dead, or after holding him dead to rights at the school fight. So not only is Venom holding back against Miles, but Miles is almost certainly struggling, if not more so than Peter did in their individual 1v1s against the creature. His battles against him, and the only way he was able to break free from Venom's grasp was when abusing his bioelectric attacks, which are established to be effective of dealing with symbiotes, or with MJ providing him with one of the many sonic grenades that the trio have access to in the game. I feel like everyone agrees with the notion that both Spider-Men are weaker than Venom. However, I think a misconception people have is Miles being superior to the symbiote-empowered version of Peter. I've other videos breaking down this topic, however in summary, physically they are certainly comparable. However, Peter would still surpass Miles in intelligence and experience, with the anti-venom giving him far too many abilities to deny the fact that he is certainly above Miles, especially since the anti-venom is probably the closest thing that symbiotes have to an actual kryptonite. Miles reviving Harry at the end of the story is something which also isn't free from criticism, and once again I don't know why. The guy is in critical condition and entering a coma-like state due to his terminal genetic disorder, and the one Spider-Man who has electric-based abilities resuscitates him long enough for him to receive urgent medical help. I guess people will criticise even the kindest acts when it comes to disrespecting the poor sticky cunt. With the game concluding with Peter taking a break from the whole Spider-Man thing to enjoy a well-earned break from crime fighting to focus more on his life with MJ, with his decision to leave the web-slinging to Miles being perfectly justified, given how far Miles has come in the Insomniac verse so far, and everything else that we've talked about. In conclusion, Miles definitely did not have plot armor in the Insomniac games. He clearly has a few signature abilities that make him stand out when compared to Peter, but you could say the exact same thing now that Peter has the anti-venom. Miles doesn't breeze through any encounter in either game, and if he does, there are usually good justifications, such as the Rhino battle. Peter goes through the more demanding battles in the PS5 game, with him dealing with Lizard and Kraven respectively, two of the most powerful villains in the verse, with Miles being shown to be consistently comparable to Peter, and even when he has his moments in the spotlight, he never once overshadows the Webhead. Yeah, he saves him a couple of times during the Sandman fight, but I mean, isn't that what good teammates are supposed to do? But anyways, I don't even want to talk about this anymore, like it's just such a dumb topic to begin with. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and like the video. Feel free to join the Discord server, all the rest of it down below. Have a great rest of your day, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.